Hi everyone. So if you're an Xbox One owner, you might want to skip this video. Some interesting data and, well, information actually coming out of Microsoft. What we have going on here is pretty much confirmation of what I was saying over the last few months, and really after Microsoft's Xbox One launch, they really are not selling these units at all. Not only are they still sitting on shelves, but Microsoft is about to stop manufacturing. That means that they've shipped more units into the retail channel that have sold. They've got around about estimates say around 3 million units sat in warehouses at the moment. They produced about 8 million units, around 1 million a month since September when they started production runs. Now, the issue here is they aren't selling. So retailers are starting to get a bit of a backlog. Microsoft has got a backlog in its warehouses, and now Microsoft's head of finance has basically said that they're going to slow down or stop producing any more Xbox Ones to sell through existing inventory. Now we can contrast this quite easily to the PlayStation 4, which has which has sold. We have to, try not to get these two confused. Microsoft talks about shipped. Sony talks about sold. I'll explain the difference in a minute. But Sony have basically sold 7 million units and can't actually keep them on the store shelves. They can only produce as many as they can every month, and they are selling straight through. Now, the main difference here, and the thing this is you've got to kind of watch for, especially with sales data, is there are two methods that companies use to talk about how well they are doing in the market. One is to say how many units you've shipped, and the other is to say how many units you've sold. Now, you might think that these two things are effectively the same thing, but they're not. The number of units you've shipped is only between you, i.e. Microsoft, and the retailer, the likes of Target, your PC World, your games, okay? Sold actually means a unit left the retailer and went home with a user. Effectively, that is a successful sale. Now, what Microsoft is doing here, and this tends to be the way that all companies, when they're effectively behind in sales, tend to do it, they will talk about the biggest number they can find, and that will normally be your shipped numbers, because obviously you're not selling them at retail. So here Microsoft are saying that they've shipped around 5 million units. Shipped 3.9 million units for the end of 2013. And we reckon that now means they've probably shipped around 5 million SKUs to retailers since launch, if we take a cut-off of, around the end of April. Now, essentially, when Sony are talking about having sold 7 million units and Microsoft are still only really talking about having shipped 5 million units, then there's a disparity here. And actually, we know around at the end of 2013, there was around 3.9 million Xbox One consoles shipped out, but only around 3.1 million units actually sold. So, obviously, a bit of a disparity there, around 800,000 units sitting at the retail level. Obviously, for Microsoft, this is pretty much the worst possible news they could have. We're now starting to hear from plenty of sources within Microsoft that they know this hasn't gone well for them, and they are now going to have to refactor. Patcher, who is an industry analyst, has got some interesting thoughts on this one. They tend to echo what I was saying at the end of last year, really, that Microsoft now, they've got to get the Kinect out of the bundle. If Sony does a price drop at any point between now and 2015, it is going to put a huge hole in the Xbox One. Microsoft can't respond on price right now. They're literally too tied in to overpriced hardware and it being under spec. The Kinect is effectively sinking the bloody console. So, Microsoft are going to have to refactor that console. I don't think we'll see speed bump necessarily. I don't think they're going to make the thing faster, but they are going to have to issue a new SKU, which removes the Kinect and allows them to drop down to the $350 price point or under. We've already seen some of the retailers taking day one console Xbox One bundles, things like the FIFA 14 bundle, and literally lopping as much money off them as they can, including now under the £300 price point. Obviously, when retailers feel they have to do that, something has gone horribly wrong. They're being left with stock they know they cannot sell come Christmas time, or even over this summer period when you've got Titanfall bundles and so on. They've got to get rid of them. It's a shame, unfortunately, that Microsoft basically screwed up. They've allowed the whole ecosystem to effectively coalesce around Kinect hardware, which isn't going to be here next year, guys. Whichever way you cut it, Microsoft will have to get rid, or they're going to have to make it cheaper to manufacture. At the moment, it's costing $150, I think, to produce a Kinect unit and put it in the box. It's $150 that would be better off not being forced on the end user, making the console more expensive compared to Sony. And again, there's no games that use Kinect. Oh, we've got Kinect Sports Rivals. Big deal. Developers aren't using Kinect. The developers I've spoken to have no intention of using Kinect unless Microsoft pays them for the development time they'll have to put into it. There's just no point. It's unfortunately hubris, I suppose, on Microsoft's part that they felt that people would buy Kinect, people would wear Kinect, and they would take it as a forced bundle. And actually people aren't taking it, you know? Not en masse. Titanfall didn't deliver the big bump in Xbox sales. And I'll tell you a little funny story. I was in a local game retailer, and they happened to do trade-ins, and I was talking to one of the guys who was testing an Xbox One. I said, oh, testing an Xbox One, so I'm bringing that in for a swap out. And he said, oh, well, actually, there's a funny story with this. The bloke owns a PlayStation 4, but his friend convinced him to swap the PlayStation 4 for a Titanfall bundle with the Xbox One. The gentleman took his Titanfall Xbox One bundle home. Within 48 hours, he was bringing it back, trying to claim that it was faulty. And could he please have his PlayStation 4 back? That speaks volumes for me about how people are looking at the Xbox One. Even those people who bought one because they were convinced by a friend that Titanfall was going to be awesome, the two together, the Xbox One console and Titanfall, it doesn't match up really to a PlayStation 4. It's as simple as that. The Microsoft have screwed up. We will now have to see how they try and recover. At least Phil Spencer is now in charge at Microsoft, a guy who actually gets gaming. So all being well now, we will see Microsoft pull their finger out, fix what's wrong with Kinect, and start selling some units. But I don't think that's going to happen until, well, 2015 at the earliest, when the price point can be dropped suitably and when they can actually put a focus on gaming